Video focuses on understanding mappings. The mapping is a new way to show the relationship between two different variables, usually x and y. So far this year we've worked with tables, graphs, and equations. A mapping is another way or another tool that we can use in math to display data about the relationship between two variables. I like to think about the mapping as something of a visual table. It has numbers in two columns just like a table, and it's just a little more visual in how it shows us how x and y are related to each other. We like mappings because they're very helpful for determining if a relationship meets the definition of a function, which is something we'll talk about in the next video. One last thing, as we start to discuss mappings and functions, we're going to start to refer to the x variable as our input and the y variable as our output. We see two examples here of mappings. One's relationship B, one is relationship R, the red one, and we see here lines that go from the input numbers, and those lines connect to different values in the output column or the output bubble. We're going to look at two examples of how you could take these mappings and convert them or translate them into a table so we can understand what these mappings are saying. For the blue relationship, we see when the input is 0, this line connects to an output value of 7. So that's another way of saying when x is 0, the solution has to have a y value of 7. 2 is connected to the value for 6. So we know when the input or the x value is 2, the output has to be 6. We see when the input is 4, that's connected to a value of 5. So if x is 4, y will be 5. And finally, we see when x is 6, y has to be 4. That 6 connects to that 4. And the last point we see, that value of 8, if the x or the input is 8, we have to get a y value of 3. Once we translate this blue mapping into a table, we see something that looks pretty familiar to the linear relationships we worked with. Every time x is going up by 2, we can see y is decreasing by 1. Every time x is going up by 2, y is decreasing by 1. Another important thing to see, every x value only has one line leaving it. That means each input, each x, only has one output or one y value attached to it. Similarly, when we look at this red table, we see 0 has a line connected to the 0 for the y. So if x, the input, is 0, for this relationship, the y is also going to be 0. When the input is 3, we see two lines leaving it. One that connects to a -1, one that connects to a +1. This means we need two data points in our table. If x is 3, the y value could be -1. And if x is 3, the y value could also be +1. So we need to list that value of 3 twice in our table since that input has two possible outputs. We also see an x value of 6 is going to get attached to a y value of -2 or +2. We can see that this mapping is a little different. We see x values that are producing more than one y value, and in the next video when we talk about what a function is, we'll see why the mapping is very helpful to quickly tell that this type of graph or mapping is not a function.